those that are joining. Appreciate you joining. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, give people a few more minutes to get to join. All right, well, I think we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining this webinar about enabling governance and compliance in a hybrid cloud environment. My name is Martez Reed, Director of Technical Marketing at Morpheus Data. I'm being joined today by Rich Gallant from NexTech Solutions. Thanks for joining me, Rich.
Thanks, Martez. Appreciate it. So,
right, so let's
go ahead. Yeah, hey, so, Martez, I definitely appreciate you having me on today. Really, the goal from a NexTech's perspective was to go through and talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing, the why of the issues we're seeing around the mission set, especially when it comes around with cloud adoption, right? One of the things that we always ask ourselves as NexTech Solutions, as an integrator of these, different capability sets is, what is the focus and what is the definition of cloud, right? And how do we bring those benefits to our users in an increasingly complex environment, right? And really one of the things it comes down to is the beauty of the cloud is its simplicity and control that's offered, right? So our focus of this today, and the reason we partner with you guys in Morpheus, is the ability to look at bringing that in a specifically a hybrid cloud and a mission focused environment for a lot of our customers, right? Bringing those nuances, the capabilities of the cloud in terms of control, orchestration, all those benefits, and how do we sustain those in a multiple stage environment, whether that's a public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud model, on-prem, whatever that may be, to try to truly unlock those benefits. So if we kind of jump to the next slide. So for me, I like to break it down as sort of what is the mission, right? And really that the driver for that is what is the reason for cloud adoption? And really what we're seeing for the most part, the focus is to reduce complexity and the cost associated with those requirements to sustain the mission, right? What that means is people are moving towards the cloud because it allows for standardization. It allows for easier compliance for management. It allows to make systems easier to use, more portable across different clouds. And that's great, right? But there inherently are associated challenges that come with that, right? While it does reduce overall complexity, managing that environment, especially in a hybrid model, is becoming more complex. Right? There's not always the instance of purely using AWS or Azure or your on-prem environment. It's becoming sort of a mixed bag, right? And within that, you can't use a lot of these native cloud tool sets to see across different environments, right? And that is a growing challenge that we're seeing as we're trying to spread workloads out. As certain clouds are really good at certain activities, we need to really look at our approach and figure out a way to really sustain operations across all those environments. And that's sort of the reason we've looked to Morpheus as really one of the, if not the best tool out there for this, right? When I look at a cloud management platform, and the need for that, Morpheus brings a lot to the table in terms of allowing us to get after that mission, right? Allow us to still migrate to the cloud, still maintain operations on-prem, look at multiple cloud providers, but look at a way to consume those and manage those services across the plane, right? And do that in a method that allows everyone from our IT operations groups to our non-IT providers and really consume the services as they need them. And the only way we've seen that successful is looking at a true, cloud management platform, and especially one that, such as Morpheus, that institutes the idea of self-service and making it easier for the non-traditional IT user to accomplish. So if we jump to the next slide as well. So diving a little bit deeper into sort of what is the mission, and again, that driver for that is what is the reason for cloud adoption in the first place, right? Well, again, by reducing cost and complexity, what that has allowed us to do is be able to migrate significant amount of workloads to these different environments. However, part of that is we need to spread the load, right? We need to look at multiple cloud providers. We need to look at instances of some on-prem, some off-prem, and to do that, to not only protect the users, but again, to unlock the benefits, right? Some are really good at AI/ML in the cloud, and others are really good at hosting enterprise services. There's a delta there, right? And people are using them for different things, which is great, but it adds inherent challenges within that. The next step, the other reason for that mission is just standard modernization, right? We're hearing a lot of containers and serverless architectures and, infrastructure as a service or infrastructure as code, and that's great. And that comes with the processes of CI/CD and DevSecOps. But within that, you have people managing those processes who may not be familiar with the cloud, who may not be familiar with an on-prem infrastructure. They may want to consume services to start, right? Part of that process is a security function. I need to scan applications. I need to scan code as I develop them. But there's no real way today to have those systems interconnect and talk and manage those multiple platforms, right? So that inherently has a challenge as well. And then finally, you look at, we're still sunsetting legacy environments, right? As we start doing this modernization, there's still going to be some lag, especially in DoD networks, of systems or applications that need to be maintained on-prem or in the cloud that aren't future-proof and ready to go for things like containerization or bare metal-based services. So as you can see, right, the mission is in the right place. We're going towards the right direction, but there's a lot of challenges, especially in these networks and people who are unfamiliar with these environments, that we need to account for, right? So going into some of those is, again, really going into, I have to maintain both legacy and next generation environments today. There's customers out there who did surveys to look at, out of 150 applications, how many can I actually modernize? Not lift and shift to the cloud, because that's one thing, but look at containerization and some of those next gen capabilities. And it's 1% of 1% possibly, right? In some cases, we have a lot of GOTS applications, we have a lot of COTS applications. Some of those things just aren't natively built for that environment. So we have to still today in our environment maintain both our legacy current on-prem infrastructure and the cloud and or multiple clouds. So again, going into that next phase is not all services are seamlessly transitioned to that environment, right? Not only maybe a technical challenge, but it may be a process challenge, or it may be a security clearance challenge, right? Some of those things just aren't natively well built to support that cloud-based service. So you need some control plane to look at managing both an on-prem and a cloud-based infrastructure. And then finally, looking at a user experience, right? So inherent with that reduced complexity within that environment comes inherently its own versions of complexity, right? I want to make this as turnkey for everyone as I can, right? I want to be able to say I'm a developer and I don't want to have to go and stand up 500 EC2 instances on my own, as well as the security controls within that. I want that done for me. I want to consume my services. So while the user experience has benefited in some ways, it lacks in others because, again, of a control plane issue. So, partnering with Morpheus and looking to you guys, right, you've done a really good job in terms of bringing that sort of overly used quotation of a single pane of glass, which I hate to use, but in this case, it's one of the most relevant in that, looking at all those challenges of legacy and next gen environments, the lack of or ability of moving some of these services to a cloud-based environment, and that transition is, I need a way to look at all of my services, all of my hosts, all of my networking, whatever that may be, in where I can as a single pane of glass. I need to know how my cloud operating environment is functioning as compared to my on-prem data center functions, and marry the two. Maybe that's just to do some analysis of, can I move this application to the cloud based on performance or cost issues? Or, hey, this application is really getting used. Maybe it makes sense to start sunsetting that, removing that to a location that isn't my own data center. And that pane of glass that you guys offer really allows us the ability to dig deep into those things and make understood decisions based on the information that we're seeing across the board, right? Within that as well, one of the larger drivers is just doing some cost accounting, right? Um, while it is more cost effective in the long run to move things to the cloud, there are some inherent costs associated with that as well. It takes money to run these services. I have to do some scheduling and planning around those. How much is it going to cost me per month? How do I procure those things? And there's no sense in doing that if I can't look at the utilization versus the cost, right? And having a tool that can see both and control both is really important, because now I can look at my on-prem utilization for specific applications and determine, based on the current rates that are publicly available for cloud-based services, I can or cannot migrate this service for any given reason, and then dive down deep into that and make informed decisions. So it's a really great way to marry that cost accounting with a single pane of glass. And then beyond that, one of the benefits of cloud overall is sort of that orchestration layer. But again, there's no real tool set today that exists to seamlessly access that layer across multiple instances of an environment, whether that's AWS, Azure, or on-prem, right? So having the ability with Morpheus to orchestrate services, to orchestrate creation of infrastructure, to do a lot of task-based orchestration in a single pane of glass for multiple environments is really key, because it cuts down on time to deploy, it cuts down on complexity of that environment, and it can make it as simple as and easy as it is to use for, again, my non-traditional IT folks. And then that ties into sort of that self-service function. And I know that isn't the specific, portion of this presentation, but it's a really important one, in that we're dealing with communicators, with data center folks, with up and coming engineers who have been operating on mobile devices since they were 12 years old, as an example, right? Part of that benefit is I don't worry about the backend infrastructure of what I need to do when I download an application or when I want to go develop something. It's just, it's existed for forever for them, right? And I think having the ability to really take that single pane of glass and put a self-service spin on it is really important, because again, going back to my last point on the slide, which is that non-traditional IT user, which is the developers of the world, or the HR people of the world, or the payroll folks, whatever that may be, there's still utilization that these folks require in those cloud-based environments or their on-prem environments. And having a way to take the services that they're used to utilizing and make it as turnkey for them as possible as something like an app store function is really critical, because they can still get their mission done regardless of whether their service is going to reside in the future state or the current state, right? So kind of marrying all those things together, it allows us to really drive better cost calculation, better adoption, more user-friendly experiences for all these guys, and still provide our actual operators and our IT management users across the board a way to manage all those environments that's cost effective for them, right? So especially if you're looking at these environments, I've seen nothing better today that really allows us to drive towards that mission. So that wraps up this slide for me. And I think, Martez, if I'm not mistaken, I turn it over to you now for your side of the brief.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely one of the big things we talk about is essentially we're a CMP, but also effectively a self-service platform. And so one of the biggest pieces is kind of, as you mentioned, the fact that there's not sort of one size fits all, and all applications aren't going to be in this one nice, neat little box. The challenge becomes, how do we start to wrap our heads around just the sheer complexity of public cloud, private cloud, with the various integrations with identity providers and configuration management and load balancers, and all these various different pieces that we see right here on the slide of things that are common to really any IT environment, where we walk through oftentimes the various handoffs between different groups and distinct groups. So how can we be able to tie those together in a more unified fashion? And so that's definitely the core of what we do, is being able to provide effective that overlay of all the complexity, and be able to provide some of that abstraction and be able to deliver that in the self-service fashion. So while we got the eye chart here, if we take a look at a pretty common example, is I need a virtual machine to be able to deliver a service, whether it's to a developer or ultimately an end service for production capabilities. How do I get from not having anything to having ultimately something that is useful and beneficial at the end of sort of a push button operation? And so as we start to think of various things like run books and the long list of steps that we have to walk through to move a virtual machine from just being created to fully production ready, there's a number of steps. So if we take a look at this is a very condensed example, but things like provision the virtual machine, interfacing with the vSphere platform, getting an IP address for something like an info blocks, the creation of a DNS record, the configuration of the operating system and maybe applications or the middleware using something like an Ansible or a Puppet or a Chef, and then potentially the creation of a CMDB CI. And so right here, we've got only 5 steps, but we see that there's disparate tools and platforms that we need to tie together as part of the automated provisioning process. And that's for me, that's the sweet spot of Morpheus, is to be able to tie all these sort of distinct and disparate applications and platforms and tools and capabilities together in a unified fashion, which is what Rich talked about, this the sort of that seamless overlay and seamless orchestration process of how to integrate with all these different components. And so for me, Morpheus is a platform that provides that capability. Morpheus has 90+ integrations out of the box, so it's not a case of writing sort of these bespoke or custom scripts to tie into this platform or tie into that platform. Out of the box, that's one of the big things for time to value with the platform is how can I leverage a platform that essentially out of the box in a matter of hours or an hour or so, I'm ready to go and integrate things in my environment and not have to sort of fiddle and deal with anything custom or some of those pieces. So cloud support, we've got vSphere, Nutanix, UCS Director, AWS, Azure, GCP, sort of the list goes on and on. And the idea is to be able to provide that overall platform that manages on-prem environment as well as public cloud, various distinct areas. Automation, you start to look at integrating with best of breed tooling, Ansible Tower, Puppet, being able to bring PowerShell and Bash scripts to really be able to harness the platform to drive that orchestration, network integration with load balancers and IPAM and DNS, data protection with Commvaults and Rubiks and Veeams of the world. So really, Morpheus becomes sort of that centralized hub of orchestration and automation to be able to drive things forward. And then we've got self-service. So the idea of I'm able to take that power and that automation and that orchestration, and then ultimately be able to deliver that in an easy to consume fashion via Morpheus's service catalog. So when we start to look at the example we walked through with the single virtual machine, starting to be able to create multi-tier applications as a catalog item to deliver an entire stack in a matter of minutes is extremely powerful. And also be able to leverage the same service catalog for what we term as operational workflows. So this could be something, network automation as an example, to be able to drive that from a service catalog item as part of just a unified process with leveraging something, whether it's an Ansible or custom scripts, to be able to abstract that into a catalog item that can just easily be ordered. And then along those same lines, being able to consume Morpheus in various different fashions. Morpheus has a service catalog. We have a power user UI, as well as an API CLI to be able to drive that automation in an automated fashion via an external tool, as well as ITSM integrations to be able to integrate with existing ITSM platforms. And so for me, this is one of the really big advantages and benefits of Morpheus, is to be able to abstract the complexity that we walked through from just trying to wrap our heads around all of the various different moving parts, and then start to distill that layer by layer. How can I take the complexity of a single process of standing up a virtual machine, leverage native Morpheus integrations, and then ultimately present that up in a catalog item? Greatly simplifies the process and really just drives forward the mission. So one of the pieces we've got is obviously we now have in our example, the virtual machine provisioned, and it's got all the integrations that we need, all the hooks to make it production ready. Now, as a platform, one of the big things is obviously going to be governance. So how can we start to really drive governance from a platform perspective? And with Morpheus, we've got centralized authentication with a number of identity providers, role-based access control, looking to align with least privilege capabilities, Policies within Morpheus allow us to drive that standardization and consistency. And then we've got approvals to provide sort of that additional layer or level of verification or validation on a given request. So some of the identity providers that Morpheus integrates with, things like Okta, OneLogin, SAML, Microsoft Active Directory, to be able to leverage the requirement of centralized authentication for account access into Morpheus. So there's obviously no need to create local accounts. Let's leverage existing centralized authentication that's available.
Martez, I apologize.
Yep.
I have a question on that one. So, and you actually may be going into it now. So when I look at role-based access control and, some of those role-based items that we're dealing with and the self-service integration, is that something you're going to speak about, what that looks like? Some of that customized self-service catalog function, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of role-based access control, a lot of the capability that the platform offers is, for me, really, really granular in terms of what you can grant access to, what you can effectively block is extremely granular. So kind of the first aspect of that is that roles. For Morpheus, the creation of custom Morpheus roles is just a core functionality. So you can create custom roles within Morpheus to be able to grant explicit access to very granular privileges. And so we want to start talking about things like catalog items. So there's the ability to grant access at the individual catalog item to say, I want this role to have access to only these catalog items, or to only be able to access Morpheus in what we term as the service catalog persona, which is what we just saw, which is the sort of the shopping cart UI, to not have the sort of the more powerful power user UI, which includes a number of different knobs and whistles, or sort of bells and whistles, but really just focuses in on, I have something I need to do. I need to order a given catalog item. Let's say it's a virtual machine. I need to order a virtual machine, and maybe there's only 2 or 3 settings or options that I need to select in order to then order that virtual machine and get the virtual machine. So we've got very, very granular capabilities in terms of what is being allowed access to. That's then at the role level. And so we can define those roles and grant specific access to certain catalog items, to certain blueprints, which we are oftentimes we leverage them for multi-tier applications. And so if you say, you know what, you only get access to this operating system and these 2 or 3 application stacks, you can grant access to just that. The user logs in, and those are the only items that they see and that they can provision and ultimately manage from there. So for me, role-based access control is really valuable in terms of what we're able to do from a granular privilege perspective. And kind of as I alluded to, there's the mapping of the identity provider groups to custom roles. So if I create a group in my identity provider, then I can then map that to a Morpheus role and then allow those granular levels of permission. Yeah, so I mean, kind of question to you, Rich. I mean, what have you seen with the role-based access control and being able to really restrict and lock down the capabilities within the platform?
Sure. Yeah, no, and honestly, it becomes less of a necessarily a restriction, right? I think the idea is, if I take the developer model, right, and folks going after this idea of a software factory and get after development, right? But ultimately in the organizations we deal with, which are programmatic and things like that, right? They want to have the ability to say, I really don't want to worry about where this is going. I just need to have access to my tools. I need to have access to my Jenkins. I need an S3 bucket to this function or that function, right? And having the ability to say, hey, look, you just pick and choose where you need this to go for a development standpoint, and it deploys that infrastructure, because ultimately the team that are doing, let's say, development of applications are not necessarily the infrastructure folks. So, cutting down the barriers of saying, I don't want to have to submit a ticket request to my J6 shop to go stand up a server for me to go do this thing. Rather, it's a button I can push and I have that environment ready to go, is really critical, right? It allows expedition in that process to get after their mission, which is development, modernization, whatever that may be. So while it's definitely important from a security control standpoint, but as much as that usability to make it, hey, infrastructure team can set policies on what you have access to, but it's nothing you have to come back for us to get it stood up for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, effectively enablement is one of the biggest pieces. Is I can take the expertise and knowledge of an infrastructure team and sort of package that into something that I can effectively hand off in a self-service fashion that says, hey, here's all of the sort of the best practices and requirements that have been developed and required of us. Now here, easily consume that at the push of a button is extremely powerful.
Exactly. Nailed it.
Yeah, so you kind of alluded to it, rich policies. So within Morpheus, we have what are known as policies. So that allow us to define certain aspects in terms of how the platform works. So an example would be for host names. There's a certain naming convention or naming standard for all the VMs that are provisioned. I can define that via a policy within Morpheus so that anytime a user provisions a virtual machine, number one, it can be locked down, but number two, that's what continues to drive that self-service and the consistency. There's no thought about what the host name needs to be. It's just automatically generated as part of the process. And from a host name perspective, we allow really advanced naming schemes as part of the process to be able to really craft it to what is required. We can do similarly with tags, especially when you think of like public cloud environments, even vSphere environments with tagging is being able to ensure that certain tags are always applied to virtual machines and instances, especially when we're talking about being able to define what our standards are from an identification or an identity standpoint as it relates to virtual machine metadata. To be able to have that consistent use of tagging is really invaluable. Then we also got a handful of others like instance expiration budgets, max VMs. But what this allows the platform to do is really drive that consistency and that compliance as part of the platform.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely critical, right? Even just looking at a bare minimum, max spend, right? We're dealing with folks that again have to deal with congressional budget items and things like that. And one of the challenges you have is not only just reporting, but sort of future state palming, cost calculations of all those things, right? How can I provide some governance around that, especially in a cloud-based environment, or even more so, a hybrid environment, right? Not only looking at my spend in AWS, but my annual spend on my VMware licensing and what I'm consuming when I am developing is really critical, because then they could say your limits are this, because I know I have congressional budgets I have to account for and report back, right? So it allows that accountability for them to determine where we're at on that spend and what we can achieve. And that's across the board for that governance to understand based on policies. You're fitting within our security policies, your naming convention is the same. So when I see that infrastructure, it's less of a dark data issue. I can identify what that is and know who it's going for and why, right? And I think that's extremely critical, because that gets lost in the wild west of what the cloud becomes, right? So
Yeah, it definitely continues to sort of filter back into that visibility and understanding of things like what resources being provisioned, and obviously being able to have that data associated with the resources, I think is really valuable. So the other aspect is approvals. So Morpheus has a native approval engine to where things like provisioning operations as well as operational workflows that I touched on a little bit can have sort of a gated process. And so what this does is continues to allow that self-service from a request standpoint. And then effectively it just says, you know what, hey, I need another sort of set of eyes to take a look and approve whatever it needs to be approved, and really helps to align with any processes that are in place for required approval, but it doesn't effectively slow down what we would think from the sort of the traditional, oh, there's a bunch of handoffs and now we've got to finally have an individual sign off, and then now it's more manual processes. It's effectively that approval there, and then once the approval is passes through, then it's on to the rest of the automation to get the process fully complete. Other thing we also have is a ServiceNow approval integration as well. So another piece for me is sort of near and dear to my heart is being able to leverage automation in terms of what we're doing from an end-to-end perspective to help address with things like hardening is a really relevant one. And so we kind of harken back to the example provisioning workflow that we walked through earlier of provision a virtual machine, reserve an IP address, create DNS records. And we've got that area where it's configure operating system applications. So how can we leverage what we're doing from a configuration management perspective, whether it's a Ansible, Chef, or Puppet, and then start to align with what our requirements are from a hardening perspective at the OS level, the application level. And so if we look at that and kind of take that section and look at how we could potentially start to align with, let's say in the case of Ansible, various roles and playbooks within Ansible that can be associated with the application of disastigs, whether it's for the operating system, database servers, middleware, web servers, all these different components to be able to just easily tie that into a provisioning workflow process. And then just have that automatically done as part of the process, for me is extremely valuable to be able to ensure that all of the machines and the applications are compliant with what has been outlined in terms of disastigs. Rich, are you seeing a lot of automation of disastigs? I know I've seen quite a bit here and there. It's
Yeah,
definitely
no,
I think one of those areas that's really maturing.
yeah, it's definitely growing, right? We have a lot of folks looking at ingesting TSOs and some of those traditional, either their own version or versions of disastigs, ultimately because of how complex they become to,
Mhm.
deploy, right? And I think, um, knowing that as a part of your workflow process, knowing that based on conjunction with the roles and the policies that you can set, having different, hardening aspects applied to different things and doing that under a single pane of glass is really key, right? Because again, it harkens back to, like you said, the idea of we're dealing with folks that are developers versus infrastructure versus security, and those roles are stovepiped in traditional environments, right? So having a way to gobble up all those processes under one, sort of application is really critical, because I no longer have to worry about, standing up my infrastructure, but also securing said infrastructure. It's a part of the process. So again, folks like developers can have a ready to go STIG VM to do what they need to do and not have to worry about that piece of their function. So no, I agree. It's definitely catching on, and it's going to become critical mass as these things just gain complexity and become more and more hard to accomplish over time and maintain as well.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've seen, and kind of along those same lines, we've got the sort of the hardening aspect and the hardening process baked in at this point in our example into the workflow. It's then at that point kind of the adage of, well, it's trust but verify is a thing often heard, and so Morpheus has built-in SCAP scanning capabilities to be able to take SCAP packages and then run that against nodes in Morpheus. And so kind of as that workflow, that stand up, that provision process, we've got the capability to provision it in a hardened fashion and then be able to come right back and ensure that there's scanning from a SCAP perspective on the node and then continually in terms of a capability on a schedule to be able to have that within sort of that single pane of glass, as you've alluded to, Rich, and have that capability there and start to really mature that process of going from a point where we can bake in the hardening and the security and then be able to then do the scanning, as well as have the capability, obviously, with our automation and orchestration capabilities to be able to start to also integrate with various different tools to get even greater visibility. So the kind of the last piece is that optimization and reporting and identifying what resources are currently there. And so I know you talked about it a little bit, Rich, but kind of the idea of number one, being able to discover brownfields In a lot of situations, it's just being able to bring in the platform and have it go out and search what's currently in the environment and start to be able to look at things like right sizing, as well as understanding things like, let's say, in AWS reserved instances, and start to get an idea of what's currently being used in the environment. Number one, to give that visibility, but also start to understand from a costing perspective. Okay, I've got X number of instances that are spun up, and start to really wrap your arms around what's being done from both an on-prem as well as a public cloud perspective in terms of usage. One of the other things platform has is be able to start having pricing in terms of on-prem, to be able to start having that showback capability. And then also having reports where you can start to look at a granular level, like which cloud's being used the most. Are we using more instances? Are we using more native services? Start to really get a sense of what's being leveraged both on-prem as well as in the public cloud, to help drive that visibility and understand where things can be adjusted from whether it's a usage perspective or just a cost perspective.
Yeah, and Martez, I think this is, and I know you're going to talk more about it here. I apologize.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think this is really important, right? Because if I look at sort of take a step back and look at the scheme as a whole, right? This is certainly an added benefit. But that being said, I now have the ability to look at my on-prem infrastructure, my cloud-based infrastructure, provide that governance, provide that security, but do so under a method in which I'm still maintaining my cost calculations as I need to, right? Typically, what we're seeing a lot, at least on our side, is unlike commercial organizations, we're dealing with cloud brokerages. We're dealing with organizations that, hey, you are the designated cloud broker or the cloud office for this organization, but that is different than the infrastructure people managing day-to-day operations of the data center, or the applications folks, or the systems folks. It's a different group altogether. So for their challenges, I have to decide what services I'm going to migrate, what services I'm going to manage. And in some cases, to be fully honest, it's pulling teeth. It's to determine, hey, how much are you paying in licensing per year? What is that cost calculation going to result in when I move the system to an AWS? How difficult is it going to be? How do I, as the cloud brokerage, manage that infrastructure for you, but still give you the access to do what you need to do on a daily basis, right? So a culmination of all those things plus the cost reporting is really critical, because it allows us to see all facets of sort of that ever evolving environment, and do it in a method that is limited in budget, right? I mean, that's ultimately the name of the game in our environment, is costs are getting cut left and right. So being able to step back and see all those things, manage all those things, and make informed decisions based on not only user experience, but performance and cost is really critical.
Yeah, definitely being able to be judicious about where things are being spent. Yeah, kind of the last touch point is kind of along those same lines, just the built-in reporting to be able to generate reports around usage for clouds, for groups, for instance types, to start to have that visibility and start to be able to pour over that data. We've also got a billing REST API. If there's an external system that needs to pull that data out of Morpheus and leverage it, whether it's something like a business intelligence platform or an existing capability, to be able to harness the information that Morpheus is collecting from an inventory standpoint, as well as being able to marry that to the billing data that Morpheus has, from the instances and all the resources that are being provisioned both on-prem as well as in public cloud. And then finally, for us, custom reports, Morpheus introduced a plugin architecture to be able to extend the platform. And custom reporting is actually one of the things that's coming out really soon, to be able to generate reports and sort of natively tweak the data that is even within Morpheus as part of the process. So for me, that is a pretty exciting one, to be able to just manipulate data in ways that are most conducive to what's desired for the particular scenario or environment. So any last thoughts, Rich?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think overall, the reason we've been working with Morpheus and dealing with this sort of challenge is that, we are, like all things in at least the government or DoD in general, adoption is always a little bit slower than commercial sectors, right? But the point in saying this is, let's use some lessons learned, right? The reason for a tool like Morpheus was created is because those challenges are seen now in commercial industries today, because they see the ability where I have to operate in multiple environments of a cloud. I have to still maintain some on-prem infrastructure, and I need a way to see all those things from a cost, from a reporting, from a integration with third-party tools. I need some way to reduce the complexity that exists as I sort of expand my services out. Like all things IT, we shrink and we grow and we shrink and we grow again, right? And you know, inherently within that, things became more complex over time. And having a tool that could breach across all those lines and simplify and provide me all these benefits is really beneficial. So as we, as organizations that support the government or the DoD or whatever you may be doing, realize that we can't just say go to the cloud and it magically happens. There are things that we want to look at. There's processes we want to put in place to ultimately support the mission, right? We here as folks that support the government or the DoD are here to do a mission, whether that's managing social security numbers to fighting a fight in the sea, in land, air, and sea somewhere, right? There's a mission behind what we do, and cutting out that complexity and making it easier to use while still getting the efficiencies of the cloud is absolutely critical. And as people start adopting these things, they start going down this process of seeing how challenging it may be, dealing with different departments, dealing with different capabilities that we need to provide. I need a way to manage that, put up my arms around it and be able to consume it in a way that will allow me to get the adoption I need to make it cost effective, to make it efficient. And from our experience so far, yeah, it's a little bit slower to adopt than commercial, but it's happening. And when it happens, it's a slap in the face, right? It's a wake up call to say, I need to figure these things out. So our hope is go through this process now. Let's use some lessons learned that are out there to really achieve the efficiencies that we need to get the most utilization we can and really start driving the innovation to the fight where we need it, right? So, no, I mean, we definitely appreciate you doing this and showing us what you guys do. It's been nothing but good things for us on our side. So we appreciate you having us on as well.
Yeah. So any of those that are on, feel free to post any questions in the Q&A. Yeah, and so for me, definitely the platform provides a lot of really great capabilities to simplify what's being done, and be able to, as I said, tie those various integrations and touch points together. And so for me, it's how can I leverage various different capabilities from a platform or a tooling perspective and easily be able to leverage those without this sort of really complex scenario where I'm tying together scripts that tie together more scripts and end up in these really bad situations of trying to untangle sort of sometimes years and years and years of strewn together scripting and code. So for me, it's essentially a framework to be able to leverage so many different tools and capabilities to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to pull the thread a little bit and sort of give some specifics, right? We run into challenges all the time where, again, we have a lot of guys doing development to look at, containerization. That's sort of always a buzzword going around, and that serverless architecture, because there's a lot of benefits, but inherently within that, especially for folks that are traditional infrastructure, right? How do you manage that when you have some folks using a Rancher platform, some folks using just a flat Kubernetes or a OpenShift or whatever, right? There's a multitude of different things that people like to use differently, right? Or a Jenkins versus these other tools out there, right? Some people have what they know, they like what the language that they use, but you as an infrastructure user and somebody who manages that as the cloud provider need to be able to sustain all those operations and do some governance, security, control, reporting, cost accounting, all those types of things in environments that you're no longer familiar with, right? And having a tool, especially one out of the box that has that native integration and support, is going to go a very long way, not only for the development environment, but for an eventual on-prem deployment environment, right? To be able to deploy those things and get them to the field faster and have them operational for folks who don't know how to do that today, via that self-service function or wherever that may be, because that's the next frontier that we're seeing. We have folks deploying containers today, and it's a different group that developed it and said, here's my application, deploy it. And it is worlds away from what they're used to. And they need ways to make that efficient in a language they understand while still maintaining their own existing infrastructure alongside that. So, again, it's not purely a run these things in AWS. It's we have to consider the implications, at least in our environment, of they eventually have to come to an on-prem environment because we have a fight to fight. And having a way to marry all those things and manage all those things under one platform is really critical as well.
Yeah. Well, if there are no questions, it doesn't seem like there are any questions. We appreciate everyone that jumped on today, and hopefully it was very insightful and helpful. And thank you for joining me, Rich.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.